Eleanor Vance believed in the clear, stratified order of the universe. There were those who wore haute couture, and there were those who sewed it. There were those who graced the front rows of Paris Fashion Week, their presence a benediction upon the designer, and there were those who could only dream of such a world from behind the smudged window of a tiny shop in a forgotten borough. Eleanor, a woman whose wealth was as old as the tarnished silver spoon she was born with, was firmly in the first category. Imani Adebayo, she assumed, was in the second. And Eleanor was about to be magnanimous. It started with a button. A single, iridescent pearl button that had tragically liberated itself from Eleanor's vintage Chanel blazer. Her usual tailor was on a month-long sabbatical in the Alps, and a frantic search led her driver down a street she'd never bothered to notice, to a shop with a simple, hand-painted sign, Imani's Fine Alterations. We mend more than fabric. The interior was a stark contrast to the opulent, minimalist ateliers Eleanor frequented. It was small and dense with the scent of hot irons and old thread. Bolts of fabric climbed the walls like ivy, and spools of every conceivable color were arranged in a perfect, dusty rainbow. And in the center of this quiet, colorful chaos, sat a woman who looked to be in her late 50s. Her hair was braided in intricate silver and black cornrows, and her hands, steady and sure, were guiding a piece of crimson silk under the needle of an ancient sewing machine. This was Imani. "Can I help you?" Imani's voice was calm, a low, melodic hum over the chugging of the machine. Eleanor held up the blazer as if it were a wounded bird. "I had a sartorial emergency. My usual artisan is unavailable." She placed the jacket on the counter, her tone implying that this was a great honor for the humble establishment. Imani stopped her work. She picked up the blazer, her fingers tracing the seams with a reverence Eleanor found surprising. She examined the spot where the button had been, her brow furrowed in concentration. A 1988 double-breasted wool crepe. "Beautifully preserved," she murmured, more to herself than to Eleanor. "The tension on this thread is loose. The others will likely follow soon. I should reinforce them all." Eleanor was taken aback. She hadn't even noticed the year of the blazer herself. "Just the one will do. I need it for a luncheon." Imani looked up, her dark eyes meeting Eleanor's for the first time. There was no judgment in them, only a quiet professionalism. To do a job halfway is to do it twice. "I will have it for you by morning. All of it." "Your work is adequate," Eleanor said, feigning a casual air as she paid. "You have a certain raw talent. Have you ever seen a real couture show?" Imani simply shook her head, a small smile playing on her lips. "Only in magazines, a long time ago." "The real thing is an entirely different universe," Eleanor declared, her voice swelling with philanthropic fervor. "The artistry, the spectacle, it can be life-changing for someone in your position. To see what all this," she gestured vaguely at the shop, "aspires to be." She leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I have a spare ticket. A +1. I'm a patron of the arts, you see. I believe in nurturing talent. Consider it an educational trip. A mentorship. My treat." The offer hung in the air, thick with condescension. Eleanor expected gratitude, perhaps even tears. She saw herself in a future Instagram post, a benevolent goddess lifting a humble seamstress from obscurity. The caption was already writing itself, "Giving back is the new black." So thrilled to introduce this undiscovered talent to the magic of Paris. #patron, #mentorship, #PFW. Imani looked at Eleanor, her expression unreadable. She glanced around her small, beloved shop, at the half-finished wedding dress on a mannequin, at the photos of smiling clients pinned to a corkboard. Then she looked back at the rich woman offering her the world on a platter of pity. "Paris," Imani said softly. "I believe I would like that very much." "Thank you, Eleanor." Eleanor beamed. The charity project was a go. The flight to Paris was a study in contrasts. Eleanor, cocooned in her first-class suite, sipped vintage champagne and complained about the thread count of the complimentary pajamas. Imani, seated beside her, a detail Eleanor made sure to mention was a significant upgrade, was quiet and observant. She ran her fingers over the textured wallpaper of the cabin, studied the intricate engineering of the fold-out table, and watched the clouds part over the Atlantic with a look of serene wonder. "You must be overwhelmed," Eleanor said, mistaking Imani's quiet contemplation for anxiety. "Don't worry. Just stick with me. I'll be your guide." "It is a lot to take in," Imani agreed, her gaze distant. "I haven't been to Paris in a very long time." Eleanor, busy scrolling through her phone, missed the flicker of nostalgia in Imani's eyes. "Well, it's changed, I'm sure. It's the epicenter of everything that matters in our world." "Our world," she thought, then mentally corrected herself. "My world." Upon landing, they were whisked away to Lou Bristol, a palace of a hotel where the lobby was dripping with crystal chandeliers and the air smelled of money and lilies. Eleanor's suite was a sprawling affair overlooking the Rue du Faubourg Saint-Honoré. Imani's room, while still luxurious by any normal standard, was pointedly smaller, a junior suite at the end of the hall. People would smile politely, their eyes glazing over before quickly scanning the room for someone more important. Imani, for her part, remained gracefully in the background. She wasn't looking at the celebrities or the influencers. She was looking at the clothes. During a show for a young, avant-garde designer, Eleanor leaned over and whispered, "See the deconstruction on that jacket? So daring. But the finishing on the hem is a disaster. You could do better than that with your eyes closed, I imagine." Imani didn't reply immediately. She was studying the way the fabric fell, the tension in the shoulders. "He is telling a story about falling apart," she said softly. "The hem is part of the story. It is not a mistake." Eleanor blinked, momentarily silenced. Quietly, Imani stepped forward. "Allow me," she said, her voice cutting through the girl's panic. She took the zipper, examined it for a second, and then, with a deft, practiced movement, worked it back and forth, releasing a snagged thread the girl hadn't seen. The zipper slid up smoothly. The young dresser looked at Imani, her eyes wide with gratitude. "Thank you. How did you?" "You must always feel the fabric's fight," Imani said with a warm smile. "It will tell you where it is caught." She then melted back into the shadows before the girl could ask her name. Eleanor, having missed the entire exchange, reappeared. "Utter madness, isn't it? Let's go. We need champagne." The pinnacle of the week was the invitation to the Maison du Bois Fall/Winter Haute Couture show. Du Bois was the oldest and most revered fashion house in Paris, currently helmed by the enigmatic genius Jean-Pierre Martel. Getting an invitation was like finding a golden ticket, and Eleanor had secured 2 front-row seats through a donation that could have funded Imani's shop for a decade. Imani glanced at the actress and gave a small, knowing smile. "Yes. 642 hours, to be exact." The Swarovski crystals were a challenge. They catch the light differently depending on the angle of the stitch. Eleanor's smile faltered. "How on earth would you know that?" "I read an article," Imani replied smoothly, turning her attention to the runway as the lights dimmed. The show began. It was a symphony of fashion, each piece more breathtaking than the last. Martel's collection was an homage to the night sky, with gowns of deep indigo velvet, capes embroidered with constellations of diamonds, and suits tailored with the precision of an architect. The audience was spellbound. The designer, Jean-Pierre Martel, a man known for his reclusive nature, stepped onto the runway for his bow. He was a legend, a visionary who rarely interacted with the public. He walked the length of the runway, a brief, practiced smile on his face, acknowledging the applause. As he turned to leave, his eyes scanned the front row. And then, he stopped. His gaze locked onto someone. The smile on his face transformed, breaking into a genuine, brilliant grin of pure delight. He changed direction, bypassing the Hollywood actresses and the powerful editors. He walked directly towards Eleanor and Imani. Eleanor's heart leaped. "He's coming to thank me," she thought, a thrill running through her. "My patronage, my influence, he's finally acknowledging it." She prepared her most gracious smile. But Jean-Pierre Martel walked right past her. He stopped in front of Imani. "Imani," he breathed, his voice filled with warmth and relief. He reached out and took both of her hands in his. "Mon ami. My friend. I was not sure you would come." Imani smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that lit up her entire face. "Jean-Pierre. You have outdone yourself. The drape on the Andromeda gown, sheer poetry." Martel laughed, a sound no one in the audience had ever heard from him in public. "Poetry that was impossible until you showed my premiere the trick with the bias cut. She said you were a magician." He then pulled her into a warm, heartfelt embrace, right there in the middle of the runway's glare. The room fell into a stunned silence, punctuated only by the frantic clicking of cameras that had finally realized what was happening. Eleanor stood frozen, her smile collapsing. Her mind was a frantic, screeching mess of confusion. What was happening? Martel pulled back but kept his hands on Imani's shoulders. He turned slightly, his voice now carrying through the silent room. "For those of you who do not know," he announced, his gaze sweeping over the bewildered faces of fashion's elite, "this is Imani Adebayo. You may not know her name, but you know her work. You have seen it on every major red carpet for the last 20 years. He then pointed to a famous singer in the second row. "And your Galaxy Tour costume, the one woven with fiber optic thread?" Imani was the only one in the world who knew how to stitch it without breaking the filaments. "We call her when a design is impossible," Martel continued, his voice ringing with admiration. "When we need a miracle in silk and thread. She prefers her quiet life, but she is, and always will be, the soul of this craft." He turned back to Imani, his eyes soft. "Thank you for coming, my dear. It means the world to see you here." He gave her hand a final squeeze, gave a curt nod to the stunned audience, and disappeared backstage. The silence that followed was deafening. Then, a slow, hesitant applause started, directed not at the departed designer, but at the woman still standing by her seat. The Hollywood actress, Elena Vance, was the first to her feet, her expression one of dawning recognition and awe. Soon, the entire room was standing, applauding the quiet seamstress from a forgotten borough. Imani simply inclined her head, a gesture of regal humility, and sat back down. Eleanor felt the world tilt on its axis. The blood drained from her face, leaving her cold and numb. Every condescending word she had spoken, every patronizing gesture, every thought of her charity project played back in her mind, each one a fresh, hot stab of humiliation. She had brought a queen to Paris and tried to teach her how to play with dolls. The rest of the evening was a blur for Eleanor. People, important people, flocked to Imani. They didn't ask for selfies, they spoke to her in hushed, reverent tones. They asked about her technique, about a legendary dress from a decade ago, about her opinion on the collection. They treated her not just as an equal, but as an elder stateswoman, a living legend. Eleanor, the woman who defined her existence by being known, became invisible. On the flight home, the silence in the first-class cabin was thick and heavy. Eleanor couldn't bring herself to look at Imani, who was calmly reading a book. Finally, as they began their descent, Eleanor couldn't bear it any longer. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Imani marked her page and closed her book. She turned to face Eleanor, her expression gentle. "You never asked." "I called you a little seamstress," Eleanor said, the words tasting like ash. "I treated you like a child." "You saw what you wanted to see, Eleanor," Imani replied, her voice devoid of malice. "You saw a woman in a small shop and you put her in a small box. The label on the box said charity. You never thought to look inside." She continued, "I love my shop. I love mending a teenager's prom dress as much as I love solving a puzzle for Jean-Pierre. The joy is in the work, in the fabric, in the hands. Not in the name on the label or the seat in the front row. That is a lesson you have not yet learned." Eleanor finally looked at her, truly looked at her, and for the first time saw not the little seamstress, but the formidable, graceful, and profoundly talented woman who sat before her. A woman who had no need for Eleanor's pity, her money, or her world. A woman who had her own. When they landed, Eleanor's driver was waiting. As he loaded the bags, Eleanor turned to Imani. Can I give you a ride?" Imani smiled, a kind, forgiving smile. "Thank you, Eleanor. But my son is here to pick me up." She gestured to a modest sedan pulling up to the curb. "I think it's time I went home." Eleanor watched as Imani got into the car and drove away, disappearing back into the city she had so arrogantly assumed Imani wanted to escape. Standing alone on the curb, surrounded by her expensive luggage, Eleanor Vance had never felt so small. The world was not, she was beginning to understand, as neatly ordered as she had always believed. True worth, like the finest stitch, is often invisible to the untrained eye. We hope you were inspired by the story of Imani Adebayo. It's a powerful reminder that talent, dignity, and success aren't always loud. Sometimes, they are as quiet and steady as a needle and thread, creating magic just out of sight. If you enjoyed this story, please give this video a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell so you never miss an update. Share your thoughts in the comments below.